So once again, where I left off, this was a Jewish daycare. Funds were helped to put these kids so moms could go to work, not have to worry about their kids during the daytime. But unlike most daycares, this Jewish daycare had kids working. So the kids actually worked by gluing envelopes. So nobody balked much about it because it kept the kids from being deported and kept their kids alive. So that's life in the ghetto, I guess, right? Alright, so I'm walking up to this a little bit further. Yeah, this is the daycare center. Cars everywhere. Alright, hang on one sec. Yep. Alright, just up the street here. We got two things on this road here. We got another meeting place for the fighting organization, and we got a self-help center. Yosefinska Street. So 18 Yosefinska and 22 Yosefinska. 13 Yosefinska. Did I miss past 13? Hang on. Right, 22. That's the daycare center. Good. Okay. So 18 is the bank. All right. This is an old bank. So 18 Yosefinska Street. This was a part of the Jewish welfare self-help. So this was a 7-man board here. Had volunteers who ran a soup kitchen, gave medicine to people who lived in the ghetto, supplies to hospitals, vaccines, x-ray plates, organized public collections, had outside connections with people beyond the ghetto. You know, it was very controversial. Some of the people in the ghetto did not like this very much because it sort of it helped people, but the people who were fighting in the ghetto didn't like the fact that it sort of helped normalize life in the ghetto. It made people complacent. Help them. You know, if people believed that the ghetto was a place for a long term and they were trying to make their life better, this is what they were doing here, you know, trying to sustain life, which is great. Some of the radicals in the neighborhood didn't like it very much. The fighting organization thought that the more content people were, the less likely they would be to rise up. So, you know, it was contentious with some of the folks who were more radical. Didn't like the fact that they were trying to normalize life and trying to, you know, make the best out of a bad situation, which, you know, normal situation would be okay, but those who knew or those who assumed that the worst was yet to come, you know, they wanted to fight, and this was, in their mind, helping them become more complacent, you know, as they got, they didn't get better off, but they were able to sustain life a little bit longer and better. But that being that, so. All right, at 13 Yosefinska was another meeting of the Jewish fighting organization. So right across the street. So here it is, right? So there was the self-help building. Then right across the street was a place where the Jewish fighting organization actually had meetings at 13 Yosefinska Street. So again, it was contentious because of the proximity, because of the radical folks in the ZOB and the folks that were trying to normalize life and sustain life over here. Down at 5 Yosefinska Street, coming up on our right, was a Jewish bathhouse. It's not the bathhouse. It's not the same structure that was back then, but again, trying to make life somewhat what life was like, So this is a new building here. This was 5 Józefinska. This was the site of the Jewish bathhouse. Across the street, get my bearings here. Across the street. Lots of stuff on the street. So 14 Józefinska Street, which is this big pink building out here. This building here is a Jewish hospital. This is one of the very few places where they actually allowed operations. Outside doctors oftentimes came in to perform operations in the ghetto at this hospital. There were meetings. The Jewish doctors had to wear armbands with the word lekarsh, which means doctor, on it at all times. In June of '42, the first deportations of the staff and patients. In June of '42, the first deportations, the staff and patients weren't deported, so that was a positive thing. So when they realized that the people who worked and were patients here were not being deported, lots of folks flocked to the hospital to seek refuge. So a lot of people hid here during the first deportations. Even though in June there were no deportations, by October of '42, all the patients were deported. They walked out, or they were taken on carts out and deported to the death camp Belzec. Some of the staff, were deported as well. As many as 10 doctors and their families were deported. By March of '43, all of them were sent to Płaszów, which is a place that just outside and for a hard labor camp. It wasn't a death camp, it was a hard labor camp. Those who did not leave, those who wouldn't leave, some of the staff, doctors, their families were murdered all on March 14th in the hospital, and they were dropped in the yard behind it and dumped in a mass grave by Płaszów. So, for a while after, so that was 1412 next to it here. For a while, this was, for a brief time, this was a orphanage in 12. So 14 was the hospital, and 12 here was an orphanage. As you see the plaques, some of the plaques they have here, the plaque, little black gold plaques talking about what they were and where they were in the ghetto on these buildings. So for a brief time, about half of a year before the first deportations, this was an orphanage. And at the other part of this building, 10, this is 12, and then 10 was the Arbeitsamt, which is the labor office at 10 Józefinska Street. All the labor records were kept here. Later they had deportation lists and files that were kept here at this building. After the 1942 October, the second deportation in '42, the one in October, this was closed down. They closed this building up.